You'll pay for this, cheating witch! Ah!
The satellite phone crackled against the howling wind as I pressed it to my frozen lips. 29,000 feet above sea level, standing on the roof of the world, I could barely feel my fingers anymore. Lena, baby, I made it. I'm on top of Everest. Static filled the line, then her voice came through, distant and muffled. Daniel, oh my God, really? You did it? I did it. The words felt surreal even as I spoke them. 2 months of climbing, 3 years of preparation, and a lifetime of dreaming had led to this moment. I wish you could see this view. It's everything I imagined. I'm so proud of you, she said, but something in her tone felt off. Distracted. The kids will be so excited. Where are they? I want to tell them myself. They're with Uncle Mark right now, playing in the backyard. Uncle Mark. My brother had been staying with them while I was gone, helping Lena manage the kids in the house. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I got back from Nepal. That's great. Tell them Daddy conquered the mountain for them. I will. Daniel, you need to get down safely now, okay? Come home to us. I'm already planning the descent. Should be back in Denver in 10 days, maybe less if the weather holds. We'll be waiting, she said, and the line went dead. I stood there for a moment, staring at the prayer flag snapping in the brutal winds. Something about that call bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Maybe it was just the exhaustion, the thin air playing tricks on my mind. Below me stretched the Himalayas, an endless sea of white peaks piercing the blue sky. I dreamed of this moment since I was 12 years old, reading about Edmund Hillary in my school library. Now I was here, one of only a few thousand people in history to stand on this exact spot. I took out my camera and snapped a few photos, then carefully packed it away. Time to head down. The summit was only halfway. Getting down alive was what separated the living from the legends. The climb down took 6 days of careful navigation through the death zone, past the Rainbow Valley of frozen climbers who'd never made it home. Each step was a negotiation between exhaustion and survival. My guide, a weathered Sherpa named Pemba, kept me moving when every muscle in my body screamed for rest. You have good mountain spirit, he told me on our final night at base camp. But something troubles your mind. He was right. The closer I got to Kathmandu, the more that phone call nagged at me. Lena's voice, the distraction, the way she'd brushed past my achievement like it was nothing special. Maybe I was overthinking it. 2 months away from your family did things to your head. The flight from Nepal to Denver took 18 hours with layovers. I spent most of it staring out the window practicing what I'd say to Ethan and Mia. How do you explain to a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old that their dad just climbed the tallest mountain in the world? How do you make them understand that every frozen step was for them? I'd planned to call from the airport, but decided against it. Better to surprise them. After 2 months of video calls and scratchy satellite phone conversations, I wanted to see their faces light up when I walked through that door. The taxi pulled up to our house in Highlands Ranch just after sunset. It looked exactly the same. Red brick, white trim, the tire swing I'd hung from the big oak before I left. Mark's Jeep was in the driveway next to Lena's Honda. Made sense. He was probably staying for dinner, helping put the kids to bed. I paid the driver and shouldered my duffel bag, still carrying the scent of wood smoke and thin mountain air. My hands shook as I reached for my keys, not from the cold, but from anticipation. 2 months felt like 2 years. The front door was unlocked. I could hear voices from the kitchen, Lena laughing, Mark's deeper chuckle, the kids chattering about something. Home sounds. Perfect sounds. I dropped my bag and walked toward the kitchen, ready to announce my return, when I froze in the hallway. Through the doorway, I could see them all gathered around the dinner table. Lena was serving spaghetti, her blonde hair pulled back in that messy bun I loved. Ethan was making airplane noises with his fork while Mia giggled. And Mark was sitting in my chair, at the head of my table, in my house. Daddy Mark, can we have ice cream after dinner? Mia asked. Daddy Mark. The words hit me like an avalanche. Of course we can, sweetheart, Mark said, reaching over to ruffle her hair. But only if you finish all your vegetables. I stood there in the shadows, watching my brother play father to my children, watching my wife smile at him like she used to smile at me. You're the best daddy, Ethan said, and Mark beamed. Well, I try to be here for you guys. That's what daddies do. They don't run off to climb mountains." The casual cruelty of that comment, delivered with a smile to my 6-year-old son, made my vision go white for a moment. "When is real daddy coming home?" Mia asked. "Soon, baby," Lena said, but her voice was flat. "Real soon. Real daddy." Like I was some distant concept, some inconvenience they had to acknowledge. I could have announced myself then. Should have. But something held me back. Call it instinct. Call it the paranoia that comes from spending 2 months where one wrong step means death. I needed to understand what I was seeing. I backed away from the doorway and slipped out the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The taxi was already gone. I stood on my own front porch like a stranger, staring at the warm light spilling from my windows. 2 months. I'd been gone 2 months, and somehow my brother had taken my place. I waited until full dark before trying again. This time, I rang the doorbell. Footsteps approached. Lena's quick, light steps. The door opened, and her face went through a series of expressions I'd never seen before. Surprise, then something that looked like guilt, then a forced smile. "Daniel, oh my God, you're early. I thought you said 10 days. I caught an earlier flight." I studied her face. She looked good, better than good. Her skin had a glow I hadn't seen in months, and she'd lost weight. "Miss my family." Of course, of course." Come in, come in." She stepped aside, but her body language was all wrong. Tense, guarded. "Daddy." Ethan came running down the hall, and for a moment everything felt normal again. I scooped him up, breathing in that little boy smell of shampoo and graham crackers. "Did you really climb the biggest mountain?" he asked, his eyes wide. "I did." "I climbed it for you and your sister." Uncle Mark said mountains are stupid and dangerous. Uncle Mark. I looked over Ethan's head and saw my brother emerging from the kitchen, Mia in his arms. He looked comfortable, at home, like he belonged here more than I did. "Danny boy," he said, but there was something off in his voice. "Welcome back, hero." Hero, the word dripped with sarcasm. "Mark." I set Ethan down and studied my brother's face. He'd always been the pretty one. Square jaw, easy smile, naturally athletic without trying. Everything had always come easy to Mark, especially the things that belonged to other people. "Daddy, Uncle Mark taught me how to ride my bike without training wheels," Mia announced proudly. "Did he?" I looked at Lena. "I thought we were going to do that together." "Well, you weren't here," she said with a shrug. Mark stepped up, into my life, my role, my family. "That's what family does," Mark said, squeezing Mia tighter. "We take care of each other." The emphasis on "we" wasn't lost on me. "Kids, why don't you go watch TV?" Lena said. "Daddy and Uncle Mark need to talk." They ran off, and suddenly the three of us were alone in my foyer. The silence stretched tight as a climbing rope. "So," Mark said, "how was your little adventure?" Little adventure. 29,000 feet of ice and rock, temperatures that could kill you in minutes, oxygen so thin your brain started shutting down. Little adventure. "Enlightening," I said. "I bet." Mark's smile never wavered. "Well, I should probably head home now that you're back. Let you get reacquainted with your family." "Actually," Lena said quickly, "Mark, why don't you stay for coffee? I'm sure Daniel has lots of stories." She wanted him to stay. In my house, with my family, she wanted my brother to stay. "I'd love to hear about the summit," Mark said, settling onto my couch like he owned it. "Must have been quite a view from up there. All alone. All alone." While he was down here, not alone at all, I sat across from them, these two people who should have been the most important in my world, and realized I was looking at strangers. Worse than strangers. Enemies who knew exactly where to stick the knife. "The view was incredible," I said carefully. "You can see forever from up there. Everything becomes very clear." "I'm sure it does," Lena said, but she was looking at Mark, not me. And that's when I noticed it. The way she looked at him. The way he looked back. The invisible thread of intimacy that connected them across my living room. My wife and my brother. 2 months. It had taken them exactly 2 months to betray everything I'd ever believed about loyalty, about family, about love. But they didn't know I knew. Not yet. I smiled and started telling them about Everest, watching their faces, cataloging every micro-expression, every tell. I'd spent 2 months learning to read the mountain, to spot the hidden crevasses that could swallow you whole. Now I was learning to read people the same way. The next morning, I woke up alone. Lena's side of the bed was already cold, which meant she'd been up for hours. I could hear her in the kitchen making breakfast, playing mom like everything was normal. I lay there staring at the ceiling, processing what I'd observed the night before. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe 2 months of isolation and oxygen deprivation had made me paranoid. Maybe what I thought I saw was just morning sleepyhead. Lena stood in the doorway holding a cup of coffee. She was wearing a robe I'd never seen before. Silk, expensive looking, the kind of thing you buy for a special someone. "Sleep okay?" she asked. "Like a rock?" Must be nice to sleep at sea level again. She handed me the coffee and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married 8 years ago. Soft, caring, present. "Daniel, we need to talk." My stomach dropped. Those 5 words that every husband dreads. About what? About us, about things that happened while you were gone. Here it comes, I thought. The confession, the apology, the end of everything. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath. "I know this isn't easy to hear, but I need you to know that Mark has been incredible. With the kids, with me, with everything. He's been the man of this house." The man of this house. My house. I see. The kids adore him. He's been more present in 2 months than you've been in 2 years. I was working, building a business, providing for this family. Providing money isn't the same as providing presence, Daniel. Mark understands that. Mark understands. Mark this, Mark that. I was starting to hate the sound of his name. Where is Mark this morning? He went home to shower and change. He'll be back this afternoon to take Ethan to soccer practice. Ethan has soccer practice? She stared at me like I was an idiot. He's been playing for 6 weeks. Mark signed him up. Mark signed him up. Mark took my son to practice. Mark was raising my children while I was gone. Lena, what exactly are you trying to tell me? She stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm trying to tell you that things have changed, Daniel. We've changed. And I don't know if we can go back to the way things were. What kind of changes? She turned around and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Defiance. Certainty. Like she'd made a decision and was prepared to defend it. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. Pregnant. She was pregnant. I did the math quickly, 2 months since I'd left. If she was showing enough to announce it, if she was far enough along to be certain. How far along? 12 weeks. 12 weeks, 3 months, which meant she'd gotten pregnant right around the time I left for Nepal. Or maybe, Daniel, I need you to understand something. This pregnancy, it wasn't planned, it just happened. With who? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. With Mark. There it was. The truth I'd been dreading, delivered with all the emotion of a weather report. She was carrying my brother's child. How long? My voice sounded strange, distant. How long what? How long have you been sleeping with my brother? She flinched at the directness of the question. Good. Let her flinch. It's not like that. It wasn't planned. You were gone and I was lonely and Mark was there and things just developed. Developed like a disease, like cancer. So you're telling me that my wife is pregnant with my brother's child. I'm telling you that we need to figure out what comes next. For everyone. What comes next? Like this was a business decision. Like the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my life was just another item on a to-do list. I stood up, surprised at how steady my legs felt. What comes next is that I take a shower and think about this. What comes next is that you and Mark figure out how to explain to Ethan and Mia why Mommy is having Uncle Mark's baby. Daniel, please. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder than it has to be. I just climbed Everest. Spent 2 months risking my life to accomplish something extraordinary, something that would make my children proud. And I came home to find my wife pregnant with another man's child, my brother's child. I'm going to take that shower now, I said. Daniel, we'll talk later, Lena. When I've had time to process the fact that my family no longer exists, I walked into the bathroom and locked the door behind me. In the mirror, I looked like a stranger, Hollow-eyed, bearded, weathered by wind and altitude, and now by betrayal. 12 weeks pregnant, which meant she'd been ducking my brother before I even reached base camp. While I was checking equipment and preparing for the climb of my life, she was in my bed with Mark. I turned on the shower and let the hot water wash away 2 months of mountain grime, but it couldn't wash away what I'd just learned. My wife was pregnant with my brother's child, and somehow I was going to make them both pay for it. I spent the next 3 days playing the role of the understanding husband. I ate breakfast with Lena, helped the kids with homework, made small talk about the climb. I even shook Mark's hand when he came by to check on everyone. But inside, I was calculating. Mark thought he was clever, thought he'd pulled off the perfect heist. Take the brother's wife, take his kids, take his place, and do it all while the poor bastard was freezing his butt off on a mountain. He probably figured I'd be so grateful to have my family back that I'd accept whatever scraps they threw me. He was wrong. On Thursday morning, I drove to my old climbing partner, Cole Benton's place in Golden. Cole and I had been through some serious crap together. Ice climbing in Alaska, technical rock routes in Yosemite, a near-death experience on Denali 3 years ago. If there was anyone I could trust with this, it was Cole. He lived in a cabin tucked into the foothills, the kind of place where privacy was more valuable than convenience. Cole had always been paranoid about technology, about people tracking him, about the government and corporations knowing too much about his business. It made him the perfect ally for what I was planning. Danny. He opened the door wearing his usual uniform of flannel and denim, a coffee mug in his hand. Heard you bagged Everest. Congratulations, brother. Thanks. Can we talk? He studied my face for a moment. Cole had always been good at reading people, especially in crisis situations. It's what had kept us both alive on more than one occasion. Come on in. Coffee? Yeah. His cabin was exactly what you'd expect. Wood paneling, climbing gear everywhere, maps of mountain ranges covering most of the wall space. It smelled like coffee and pine smoke and the kind of solitude I was starting to crave. So, he said, pouring me a cup from an old percolator, what's eating you? I told him everything. The phone call from Everest, the scene in my kitchen, the pregnancy announcement. I kept my voice level, factual, like I was describing a weather pattern or a route difficulty, but Cole knew me well enough to hear the rage underneath. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Duck, he finally said. Yeah, your brother and your wife, while I was on Everest. Jesus Christ, Danny, that's some biblical level betrayal right there. I need your help. Anything, you know that. I need information. About Mark, about his finances, his business dealings, anything that might give me leverage. Cole leaned back in his chair. You planning something? I'm planning everything. He nodded slowly. Cole understood the mountain mentality. When someone threatens your survival, you don't negotiate. You eliminate the threat. Mark's always been a duck-up, he said, even in high school. I heard he's been running some kind of import business, probably not entirely legal. And there's talk he's been gambling again. Gambling? Mark had always had a problem with cards, with sports betting, with any game where he thought he could beat the odds. It's what had gotten him kicked out of college, what had cost him his marriage to Sarah 5 years ago. What kind of import business? Outdoor gear, supposedly. Brings stuff in from China, sells it online. But the margins don't add up, you know? Guy's driving a $50,000 Jeep, living in a condo in Cherry Creek, taking expensive vacations. Either he's the world's greatest salesman or there's something else going on. Something else going on. That was Cole speak for illegal crap. I need you to find out more. Consider it done. What about Lena? What about her? You planning to take her down too? I thought about that morning's conversation, about the way she'd delivered the news of her pregnancy like it was something I should be grateful for. Like I should thank her for the opportunity to raise another man's child. She made her choice, Cole. Now she gets to live with the consequences. And the kids? The kids are mine. They're going to stay mine. Cole nodded. Fair enough. Give me a week. I don't have a week. Mark thinks he's won. The longer this goes on, the harder it'll be to fix. Then give me 3 days. Done. I stood to leave, but Cole caught my arm. Danny, whatever you're planning, just be careful. Don't do anything that can't be undone. I looked him in the eye. They should have thought of that before they decided to duck with my family. I'm serious. Don't become someone you can't live with. I already am someone I can't live with, Cole. I'm a man whose wife is carrying his brother's child. I'm a father whose kids call another man daddy. I'm already someone I don't recognize. He released my arm. 3 days. 3 days. Those 3 days felt like the longest of my life. I went through the motions of normal family life while my wife and brother continued their charade. Mark came by every day, always with some excuse, bringing groceries, fixing a leaky faucet, helping with the kids. Lena welcomed him like he was the hero returning from war instead of the snake who'd invaded my garden. The worst part was watching my children. Ethan had started imitating Mark's mannerisms, the way he walked, the way he laughed. Mia would run to Mark when she got hurt, seeking comfort from the wrong father figure. They were slipping away from me day by day, hour by hour. But I kept my rage contained, locked away behind a mask of acceptance. Let them think they'd won. Let them get comfortable with their victory. On Saturday morning, Cole called. "Can you meet me at the usual place?" The usual place was a diner in Morrison, far enough from both our neighborhoods that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. I'd been there waiting for 20 minutes when Cole slid into the booth across from me, a manila folder in his hand. "You're not going to like this," he said. "I already don't like any of it." "Show me what you found." He opened the folder and spread several documents across the table. Bank statements, credit reports, photographs, what looked like legal documents. "Your brother is in deep crap financially," Cole said. "The import business is mostly a front. He's got gambling debts to some very unforgiving people, his credit is maxed out, and he's about 3 months behind on rent." I studied the bank statements. Mark's checking account showed a pattern of large deposits followed immediately by large withdrawals. Money coming in fast, going out faster. What kind of gambling debts? 50 grand to a guy named Vincent Torres. Torres runs book out of a strip club in Thornton. Not the kind of guy you want to owe money to. $50,000. No wonder Mark had been so eager to move in with Lena. Free rent, free food, free access to whatever else he wanted. "What about these?" I pointed to the legal documents. "Divorce papers from his ex-wife. She's suing him for back alimony and child support. Another 20 grand he doesn't have." So Mark was broke, in debt to dangerous people, and facing lawsuits from multiple directions, and his solution was to steal my life. "There's more," Cole said. "I did some digging into his business records. The import company is registered under Lena's name." My blood froze. "What?" "She's the official owner. If the IRS or customs comes looking, if Torres decides to collect violently, they'll come after her first. Lena." He dragged my wife into his illegal schemes, made her a target without her even knowing it. "Does she know?" "I doubt it. Mark probably told her it was just paperwork, maybe said it was for tax purposes." Women trust their lovers to handle business stuff, especially when they're in love. In love. The words hit me like ice picks. "You think she's in love with him?" Cole shrugged. "She's pregnant with his kid, Danny. She's planning a future with him. Whether it's love or just convenience, it doesn't matter. The end result is the same. The end result. My family destroyed, my life stolen, my future erased." I gathered up the documents and stuffed them back in the folder. "I need copies of everything." "Already made them, Danny. What are you planning to do with this?" I looked at my old climbing partner, this man who'd helped me survive avalanches and storms and situations where death was just one mistake away. "I'm going to teach them both what happens when you steal from the wrong person. And after that, I'm going to take my children and disappear into the mountains for a while. Let the dust settle." "You sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Cole nodded slowly. "Then I'll help you do it right." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Mark had 2 weaknesses, his gambling addiction and his inflated ego. I was going to use both against him. That evening, I sat down with Lena after the kids were in bed. She was on the couch, one hand resting on her barely visible bump, reading a pregnancy magazine, the picture of domestic bliss. "Lena, we need to discuss the practical aspects of this situation." She looked up from an article about prenatal vitamins. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we need to figure out the financial implications. The house, the kids' college funds, healthcare, all of it." "Oh." She seemed surprised that I was approaching this like a business problem instead of an emotional crisis. I hadn't really thought about the money side. Of course she hadn't. Lena had always left the financial planning to me while she focused on volunteering and social activities. She had no idea how precarious our situation actually was. Well, I have. And I think we need Mark to become more involved in the financial responsibilities. What do you mean? I mean, if he's going to be part of this family, if he's going to father a child with my wife, then he needs to contribute financially. Don't you think that's fair? She nodded slowly. I suppose that makes sense. Good. I've been thinking about setting up a family partnership. Pool our resources, make decisions together, share the expenses equally. A partnership? It's just paperwork, really. But it would give us all legal protection and make sure everyone's contributing their fair share. The truth was, it would give me legal control over Mark's assets, what few he had left. Once he signed those papers, I could freeze his accounts, liquidate his property, and leave him with nothing. That sounds reasonable, Lena said. Mark's been paying for a lot of things anyway. The groceries, Ethan's soccer gear, Mia's dance classes. Of course he had. Spending money, he didn't have to play the role of devoted stepfather. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers. We can make it official next week. Okay. She went back to her magazine, but I could see her mind working. Daniel, I want you to know that I appreciate how mature you're being about this. A lot of men would have reacted differently. Like with violence, she meant. Like a normal human being would react to finding his wife pregnant with his brother's child. We're all adults here, Lena. We need to make the best of the situation. Mark will be so relieved. He's been worried about how you'd handle the financial pressure. Mark had been worried about financial pressure. The man, who owed 50 grand to a loan shark, was worried about my ability to handle money problems. Tell Mark not to worry about anything, I said. I'm going to take care of everything. And I meant it. Getting Mark to sign the partnership papers was easier than I'd expected. He saw dollar signs instead of legal language, thinking he was finally getting access to my money instead of signing away control of his own assets. We met at a coffee shop downtown, just the two of us, to hash out the details man to man. Mark showed up wearing a new leather jacket and expensive sunglasses, playing the part of successful businessmen. Danny, I have to say, I'm impressed by how well you're handling all this, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. A lot of guys would have lost their crap. What's the point? The situation is what it is. Exactly. And look, I want you to know that I never intended for things to happen this way. It just did. Things just happened, like infidelity was some kind of natural disaster, unavoidable and blameless. The important thing now is making sure everyone's taken care of, I said, pushing the contract across the table, especially the kids. Mark glanced through the pages, but I could tell he wasn't really reading. He was too focused on what he thought he was gaining to pay attention to what he was actually losing. This gives us both equal say in financial decisions, equal partnership in everything. Income, expenses, assets, debts. And it protects Lena and the baby? Completely. Everyone's interests are covered. He signed without reading the fine print. Of course he did. Mark had always been too eager, too trusting when it came to easy money. He didn't see the clauses that gave me power of attorney over his accounts in case of incapacitation or absence. He didn't notice the section about debt assumption and asset forfeiture. He just saw his name next to mine on a piece of paper and thought he'd finally beaten his big brother at something. Partners, he said, extending his hand. Partners, I agreed, shaking it. His grip was firm, confident. The grip of a man who thought he held all the cards. 2 hours later, I was in my lawyer's office filing the paperwork. By close of business, I had legal access to every penny Mark owned, and legal responsibility for every penny he owed. Including that $50,000 to Vincent Torres, I started slowly, methodically. The key to destroying someone financially is to make it look like bad luck rather than sabotage. A series of unfortunate events instead of calculated revenge. First, I called Torres. Vincent, this is Daniel Cross. I believe you know my brother Mark. Yeah, I know Mark. He owes me money. $50,000, according to my information. $52,500 with interest. Who the duck is this again? I'm his business partner now. We've entered into a legal partnership that makes me responsible for his debts. Is that so? I'm prepared to settle his obligation to you, but I need a small favor in return. What kind of favor? I need you to call in the debt immediately. Full payment, no payment plan, no extensions. Torres was quiet for a moment. You want me to put the squeeze on your own brother? I want you to collect what you're owed. How you do that is your business. This is some cold crap, partner. This is business, Vincent. Are you interested? I'll have my boys pay Mark a visit this afternoon. Perfect. I'll have your money ready by the end of the week. Pleasure doing business with you, Daniel. The second call was to Mark's ex-wife, Sarah. She'd always hated me by association. I was the responsible brother who made Mark look even worse by comparison. But money trumps family grudges. Sarah, it's Daniel Cross. What do you want? I want to help you collect the alimony and child support Mark owes you. He doesn't have any money. He does now. We've become business partners. I'm prepared to pay you the full $20,000 he owes, plus interest. In exchange for what? In exchange for you filing an immediate motion for contempt of court. Force him to pay up or face jail time. You want me to threaten Mark with jail? I want you to use the legal system to collect what your children are owed. Shouldn't that be your priority? She was quiet for a long moment. $20,000 plus interest? $25,000, cash. I'll call my lawyer this afternoon. The third call was to the IRS fraud hotline. I'd like to report suspected tax evasion involving an import business. By Thursday, Mark's world was collapsing. Torres's men had visited his apartment, making it clear that $52,500 was due immediately. Sarah's lawyer had filed the contempt motion, triggering an automatic hold on his bank accounts, and the IRS had frozen his business assets pending investigation. He showed up at my house that evening, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Danny, we need to talk. Come in, you look terrible. I'm having some financial problems. What kind of problems? Some debts are coming due faster than I expected. And there's been a misunderstanding with the tax people about my business. How much do you need? 60 grand, maybe 70. $70,000. He was asking me to pay off the debts he'd accumulated while ducking my wife. That's a lot of money, Mark. I know, but we're partners now, right? Your lawyer said the partnership makes us responsible for each other's obligations. That's true, but $70,000 is a significant sum. Danny, I'm desperate here. These people Torres works for, they're not reasonable. And if Sarah's lawyer gets that contempt order, I could go to jail. I see the problem. Can you help me or not? I pretended to consider it, letting the silence stretch between us. Mark was sweating now, despite the cool evening air. I can help you, I finally said. But I'll need some collateral. What kind of collateral? Your apartment, your car. Anything with your name on it? Danny, that's everything I own. Mark, you came to me asking for $70,000. Did you think I'd just hand it over based on your good intentions? He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from childhood, when he'd gotten caught stealing from Mom's purse or lying about his grades. Okay, fine. Whatever you need me to sign, I'll have the papers drawn up tomorrow. In the meantime, you should probably find somewhere else to stay, just until this financial situation gets resolved. What do you mean? I mean Torres knows where you live. And he knows you owe him money you don't have. It might be safer for everyone if you kept a low profile. Can I stay here? I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who'd invaded my home, seduced my wife, stolen my children's affection, and now wanted me to protect him from the consequences of his own actions. I don't think that's appropriate given the circumstances. The circumstances? You're sleeping with my wife, Mark. She's carrying your child. I think it would be awkward for all of us if you move back in. But where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. You're a grown man. Figure it out. He stared at me for a long moment, maybe finally beginning to understand that his big brother wasn't going to make this easy for him. Fine. I'll find a motel or something. Good idea. He turned to leave, then stopped. Danny, why are you helping me at all, after everything that's happened? I smiled at him, the kind of smile I'd perfected on Everest when the cold was so brutal that showing weakness meant death. Because we're family, Mark. And family takes care of each other. Within a week, Mark had lost everything. The contempt order went through, freezing what little remained in his accounts. Torres's people were making daily visits to his cheap motel, reminding him that patience had limits. The IRS investigation had revealed enough irregularities to trigger criminal charges. But the beautiful part was that none of it looked like my doing. It all appeared to be the natural consequence of Mark's poor decisions finally catching up with him. Lena was getting nervous. "Daniel, Mark's in real trouble," she said over breakfast on Friday morning. "He's scared to leave his motel room." "What kind of trouble?" "Financial trouble, legal trouble. He says people are threatening him." "That's unfortunate." "Unfortunate. Daniel, he's the father of my unborn child. And that's supposed to be my concern because—" She stared at me across the kitchen table. "Because you said you wanted to help. You said we were all going to work together." "I am helping." I offered him $70,000. In exchange for everything he owns. In exchange for reasonable collateral? Yes. Lena, I'm not a bank. I can't just give away that kind of money without protection. But if something happens to him, what's going to happen to him? I don't know. He won't tell me details, but he's terrified. Good. Terror was what I'd been aiming for. Maybe Mark should have thought about consequences before he made the choices that led to this situation. What's that supposed to mean? It means actions have consequences, Lena. Mark's been making bad decisions for years. Now he gets to live with the results. You're enjoying this. I looked at my wife, my pregnant, adulterous wife, and realized she was right. I was enjoying it. I'm not enjoying anything. I'm simply not taking responsibility for cleaning up Mark's messes. He's family. Family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family doesn't duck family, Lena. Family doesn't steal children and houses and wives. Mark stopped being family the moment he decided to take my place. Daniel, no. You want to know what family looks like? Family looks like me spending 3 years planning and saving for Everest. Family looks like me risking my life to accomplish something that would make my children proud. Family looks like calling home from 29,000 feet to share the biggest moment of my life with the people I love. I stood up, my coffee untouched and cooling. Family doesn't look like coming home to find my brother sitting in my chair, my children calling him daddy, and my wife carrying his child. I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way. And now, Mark gets to face the consequences. And so do you. What's that supposed to mean? It means you made your choice, Lena. You chose Mark over me. You chose his child over our marriage. Now you get to live with that choice. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her sitting at the table with her hands protectively covering her belly. Time for phase 2. The hardest part of the whole plan was dealing with Ethan and Mia. They were innocent victims in this war between adults, but I couldn't protect them from the fallout without risking everything. So I did what I'd learned to do on the mountain. I focused on survival first, guilt later. That weekend, I took them hiking in the Rockies. Nothing too challenging, just a gentle trail through some aspens that were just starting to turn golden. Mia rode on my shoulders for the steep parts, while Ethan scrambled ahead, trying to spot wildlife. "Daddy, why hasn't Uncle Mark come to see us this week?" Mia asked. "Uncle Mark is dealing with some grown-up problems right now, sweetheart." "What kind of problems?" "The kind that adults have to solve themselves." "But he promised to take me to the zoo on Saturday." "I'll take you to the zoo instead." "It's not the same." No, it wasn't the same. Mark had charmed my children with expensive outings and constant attention, making himself the fun parent while I was the distant provider. But charm doesn't last when reality comes knocking. "Ethan, come here for a minute." My son jogged back down the trail, his cheeks flushed from exertion and mountain air. "What's up, Dad?" "I want to tell you guys something important. Something about family." They both looked at me with those serious expressions children get when they sense adult drama approaching. Sometimes people we care about make mistakes. Big mistakes that hurt the people they're supposed to love. "Like when I broke Mom's vase?" Mia asked. "Bigger than that. Mistakes that change everything." "What kind of mistakes?" Ethan was old enough to sense that this conversation was about more than broken vases. The kind where someone you trust betrays that trust. Where they take things that don't belong to them. Did Uncle Mark steal something? Out of the mouths of babes. Uncle Mark took something very important from our family. Something that can't be given back. What did he take? I looked at my children, my son with his serious dark eyes, my daughter with her blonde curls and trusting smile, and realized I was at a crossroads. I could lie to them, protect them from the ugly truth, and risk losing them to Mark's continued manipulation. Or I could tell them enough truth to inoculate them against his charm. Uncle Mark took Mommy away from our family. He convinced her to love him instead of me. But Mommy still loves you, Mia protested. Does she? When Uncle Mark is around, who does Mommy pay attention to? They were quiet, processing this. Children see more than adults give them credit for. And when Uncle Mark is here, who do you guys run to when you need help? Uncle Mark, Ethan admitted quietly. But why is that wrong? Mia asked. Uncle Mark is nice. Uncle Mark is nice because he wants to replace me. He wants to be your daddy instead of me. But you're our real daddy, Ethan said. That's right. I'm your real daddy. And real daddies don't abandon their children. Real daddies climb mountains and come home to tell their kids about it. Real daddies work hard and sacrifice things so their families can have good lives. Uncle Mark said you left us to climb a stupid mountain. There it was. The poison Mark had been dripping in their ears. Ethan, do you think climbing Everest was stupid? No. It was awesome. Do you think I left you? Or do you think I went away for a little while to do something amazing that you could be proud of? You went away to do something amazing. That's right. And while I was doing something amazing, Uncle Mark was here telling you that I abandoned you. Do you see how that's different? They both nodded slowly. The truth is, guys, Uncle Mark has been lying to all of us. He's been pretending to be part of our family when he really just wants to take our family away from me. What's going to happen to Uncle Mark? Mia asked. Uncle Mark is going to have to go away for a while. And things are going to be different around our house. Different how? Mommy and I are going to have some serious talks about what's best for our family. And you two are going to help me decide what we should do. What do you mean? I mean, you're old enough to have opinions about who you want to live with and how you want our family to work. It was a heavy burden to put on children so young, but Mark had forced my hand. If this was going to be a war for my kids' loyalty, I was going to fight it with truth instead of lies. We want to live with you, Daddy, Ethan said. Both of us, Mia agreed. Even if it means not seeing Uncle Mark anymore? They looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations siblings have. Even if it means not seeing Uncle Mark, Ethan confirmed. I hugged them both, feeling something tight in my chest finally start to loosen. They were still mine. Whatever else happened, my children were still mine. Mark finally came crawling back on a Tuesday evening, looking like he'd been living rough for days. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven, and there was a desperate edge to his movements that told me Torres's people had been keeping the pressure on. Danny, we need to talk. Come in. You look like hell. I feel like hell. Listen about that money. The $70,000, I have it ready. Do you have the collateral paperwork? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been thinking, and I don't think I can sign over everything I own. I see. I mean, what if something happens? What if I can't pay you back? I'd be homeless. Mark, you came to me asking for help with a debt to Vincent Torres. That's not a request you make lightly. I know, but what? You've changed your mind about needing the money? No, I still need it. Isn't there another way? I sat down across from him in my living room, studying his face. He looked like a man who'd been backed into a corner, which was exactly what I'd been aiming for. What kind of other way? Maybe you could talk to Torres directly. Negotiate something. You want me to negotiate with a loan shark on your behalf? You're good with people. You could probably work something out. Mark, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want me to risk my reputation and possibly my safety to clean up a mess you created by gambling money you didn't have? We're family. Are we? Because family doesn't usually duck each other's wives. The words hung in the air between us like a blade. Mark's face went pale. Danny. No? Let's talk about family, Mark. Let's talk about the phone call I made from the summit of Everest, when I wanted to share the biggest moment of my life with my family. Let's talk about coming home to find my children calling you Daddy. I never asked them to call me that. Didn't you? You moved into my house, took over my role, made yourself indispensable to my wife and children. What did you think would happen? I was helping. You were taking. You've always been a taker, Mark. In high school, you took my girlfriend. In college, you took money from our parents that was supposed to be for both of us. And now you've taken my family. Lena made her own choice. After you spent 2 months working on her while I was gone. After you convinced her that I'd abandoned them. Mark stood up, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to hit me. I hoped he would. You want to know the truth, Danny? The truth is that Lena was lonely. The truth is that your kids barely knew who you were. You were so busy chasing your mountain climbing fantasy that you forgot you had a family, and you were happy to remind them. I was there for them when you weren't. You were there to take advantage of them when I wasn't. Duck you. No, Mark. Duck you? You want to know why I'm not just handing you $70,000? It's because I know exactly what kind of man you are. You're the kind of man who seduces his brother's wife while he's risking his life on a mountain. You're the kind of man who teaches children to call him daddy when their real father is working to provide for them. I love Lena. You love what Lena represents. You love the house and the kids and the life you could never build for yourself. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me, Mark, what exactly did you plan to do when I came home? Were you going to confess? Were you going to move out and let me reclaim my family? Or were you planning to stick around and watch me struggle with the fact that my wife is carrying another man's child? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to sign over your assets as collateral for the loan. You're going to take the money and pay off Torres and Sarah and whoever else you owe. And then you're going to disappear from my family's life. And if I don't, then you can explain to Torres why you don't have his money. You can explain to the police why you've been evading arrest on the contempt charges. And you can explain to the federal prosecutors why your business records don't match your tax filings. You son of a bitch! You set me up! I didn't set you up, Mark. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. What about Lena? What about the baby? What about them? The baby is mine. The baby is an innocent child who deserves better than a father who's broke, in debt to loan sharks and facing federal charges. You can't just take my child. I'm not taking anything. Mark, you're giving it up. You're choosing to walk away rather than face the responsibilities of fatherhood. I'm not. You're not what? You're not going to sign the papers? Fine. Good luck with Torres. I stood up and walked toward the door. Danny, wait. What? If I sign the papers? If I take the money and disappear? What happens to Lena? Lena made her choice. Now she gets to live with it. You'll take care of her? I'll make sure she and the child have what they need. But our marriage is over, Mark. You made sure of that. He was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. Where are the papers? The signing took place the next morning at my lawyer's office. Mark showed up looking like a man attending his own execution, which wasn't far from the truth. He was signing away everything he owned to pay debts he'd accumulated while destroying my life. My lawyer, Jim Crawford, had done excellent work. The documents were airtight, giving me complete control over Mark's assets while technically maintaining the fiction that this was a business loan between partners. Mr. Cross, Jim said to Mark, I need to make sure you understand what you're signing. This agreement gives your brother power of attorney over all your assets, including your apartment, your vehicle, and your business holdings. I understand. And you understand that failure to repay the loan according to the agreed terms will result in forfeiture of those assets? I understand. And you understand that the loan terms require full repayment within 60 days? Mark looked at me sharply. 60 days? I thought we said 6 months. The papers say 60 days, I replied calmly. Danny, there's no way I can pay back 70 grand in 60 days. Then I guess you'll forfeit the collateral. But that's everything I own. Yes, it is. Jim cleared his throat. Mr. Cross, if you're not comfortable with the terms, we can postpone the signing while you review. No, Mark said quickly. No, I need the money today. Of course he did. Torres had made it clear that today was the deadline. Sign the papers or face the consequences. Mark signed every document without reading them, his hand shaking slightly as he scrawled his signature. When it was done, Jim handed him a cashier's check for $70,000. "Pleasure doing business with you," I said, shaking Mark's hand. "Yeah," he replied, but there was no conviction in it. "Mark, one more thing." "What?" "I think it would be best if you didn't contact Lena or the children for a while. Let them adjust to the new situation. For how long? Indefinitely. Danny, you can't keep me from my own child. I'm not keeping you from anything. I'm suggesting that a man facing federal charges and harassment from loan sharks might not be the best influence on small children. But the choice is yours, Mark. You can stay in town and deal with Torres when the money runs out, or you can take this opportunity to start fresh somewhere else." He understood. He could take the money and run, or he could stay and watch me systematically destroy what remained of his life. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. Jesus, Danny! When did you become so cold? I looked at my brother, this man who'd shared a womb with me, grown up in the same house, carried the same genes, and felt nothing but contempt. I became cold the moment I realized that family loyalty was a one-way street. He left the lawyer's office without another word, clutching the cashier's check like a life preserver. I never saw him again. Lena took the news about Mark's departure better than I'd expected. She cried, of course, but there was something resigned about it, like she'd known this moment was coming. He said he had to leave town for business, she told me that evening. Something about expanding his import operations. Did he say when he'd be back? No, he was very vague about everything. I nodded sympathetically, playing the role of the understanding husband dealing with his wife's affair partner's sudden disappearance. I'm sure he'll call when he gets settled. Do you think so? Of course. He wouldn't just abandon you, especially with the baby coming. But weeks passed, and Mark didn't call. His phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment was empty, cleared out overnight. His Jeep had been sold to a dealer in Colorado Springs. Mark Cross had vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. Lena grew more anxious as the silence stretched on. She called Mark's few friends, his ex-wife, even his old employers. But no one had heard from him. It was like he'd simply evaporated. "Daniel, I'm starting to get worried," she said one evening in October. "It's been 6 weeks since I heard from him. Maybe he's just busy getting established in his new location." But he promised he'd call. He promised he'd be involved with the baby. Lena, you need to face the possibility that Mark might not be coming back. What do you mean? I mean, Mark has always been unreliable. He makes promises he can't keep, starts things he can't finish. Maybe this is just who he is. But the baby will be fine. We'll make sure of that. I sat down next to her on the couch, close enough to take her hand, but far enough to maintain emotional distance. Lena, I know this situation is complicated. I know we have a lot to work through. But that child is going to need stability, regardless of who the biological father is. You'd really help raise Mark's child? I'd help raise any child who needed it. That's what decent people do. She started crying then, but they were tears of relief rather than grief. I was so scared you'd make me choose. I'm not going to make you choose anything, Lena. But I need you to understand that our marriage is going to look very different going forward. Different how? Different in that I won't pretend this didn't happen. Different in that trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild. Different in that I'll never again be the naive husband who believes his wife is faithful just because she says so. She flinched at the directness, but nodded. I understand. Do you? Do you really understand what you've done to us? I made a mistake. You made a choice, Lena. You chose to sleep with my brother while I was risking my life on Everest. You chose to get pregnant with another man's child. You chose to let my children call him daddy. Those weren't mistakes. They were decisions. I know. And now you have to live with the consequences of those decisions, just like I do. What consequences? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard where Mark had taught Ethan to ride his bike. The consequence is that our marriage is over in everything but name. The consequence is that I'll provide for you and the child financially, but I won't pretend to love a woman who betrayed me so completely. The consequence is that you get to spend the rest of your life knowing that you destroyed something good for something temporary. Daniel, The consequence is that when people ask you why your husband looks at you like a stranger, you'll have to remember this conversation. You'll have to remember that you had a man who loved you completely, and you threw it away for a few months of excitement with his brother. She was sobbing now, but I felt no urge to comfort her. The woman I'd loved enough to marry, to have children with, to climb mountains for, that woman was gone. In her place was a stranger who happened to live in my house and carry my name. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix broken trust. Sorry doesn't make me forget coming home to find my children calling another man daddy. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you're carrying his child instead of mine. What do we do now? Now we coexist. We raise our children together, we maintain the appearance of a marriage for their sake, and we both pretend that what happened didn't destroy everything we built together. Can you live like that?" I turned away from the window and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. But beauty means nothing when it's wrapped around betrayal. "I can live like that," I said. "The question is whether you can." Winter came early that year, blanketing the Rockies in snow by mid-November. I found myself spending more time in the mountains, taking weekend climbing trips with Cole, needing the clarity that only came from physical exertion and thin air. The house felt different now, quieter. Lena moved through her pregnancy with mechanical efficiency, attending doctor's appointments, buying baby supplies, preparing for a child whose father had vanished without explanation. She'd gained weight, but it looked good on her. Pregnancy suited her in ways that made our situation even more painful. Ethan and Mia had adjusted to Mark's absence better than I'd expected. Children are resilient, and they had quickly transferred their loyalty back to me once Mark was no longer there to compete for their attention. They still asked about Uncle Mark occasionally, but with decreasing frequency as weeks turned to months. "Daddy, will the new baby be our real brother or sister?" Mia asked one evening while I was helping her with a puzzle. "The baby will be your half-brother or half-sister," I explained. Which means you share one parent, mommy, but not both parents. Will you be the baby's daddy?" It was a complicated question that deserved a simple answer. "I'll be the daddy who takes care of the baby, just like I take care of you and Ethan." "But not the real daddy?" "What makes a real daddy, sweetheart?" She thought about it seriously, her little brow furrowed in concentration. "A real daddy loves you and takes care of you and teaches you things." "That's right. So if I love the baby and take care of the baby and teach the baby things, what does that make me? The real daddy." "Exactly." Lena, who'd been listening from the kitchen, came into the living room with tears in her eyes. "Daniel, can we talk?" I followed her into the kitchen where she stood with her hands resting on her now prominent belly. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being kind to the children about this. For not making them choose sides. They're innocent in all this, Lena. They don't deserve to suffer because of adult mistakes." "I know, I want you to know that I appreciate it." I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. The truth was, I'd considered using the children as weapons in this war. I'd considered poisoning them against their mother, making them understand exactly what she'd done. But that would have made me as destructive as Mark, and I refused to become him. "Has Mark called?" I asked. "No, not once." "Are you surprised?" Yes, I thought he'd at least want to know about the baby. Mark wants a lot of things, Lena. But wanting and doing are different concepts for him. Do you think he's okay? I almost laughed. She was worried about Mark's well-being, concerned that something might have happened to him. She had no idea that I knew exactly where he was. San Diego, living in a cheap apartment near the naval base, working construction under an assumed name, staying one step ahead of Torres's collection efforts. I'm sure Mark is fine. He's always been good at landing on his feet. But to just disappear like that? Mark disappeared because staying would have meant facing consequences he wasn't prepared to face. It's what he's always done when things get difficult. You really think he's just gone? I think Mark is exactly where he wants to be, Lena. And we're exactly where he wanted us to be. What do you mean? I mean, he got what he wanted from this situation. He had his fun, and when it stopped being fun, he left. Now we get to deal with the aftermath while he starts fresh somewhere else. She was quiet for a long moment, processing this possibility. That's a terrible thing to say about someone. It's a terrible thing to be true about someone. But it is true, Lena. Mark used you, used our children, used our home as his playground, and when the bill came due, he vanished. So what do? We move forward. We raise our children. We coexist as civilly as possible. And that's enough for you? I looked at my wife, my pregnant, betrayed, abandoned wife, and felt something that might have been pity. It has to be enough, Lena. It's all we have left. Lena went into labor on a Tuesday in February, 3 weeks before her due date. I drove her to the hospital through a snowstorm, her contractions coming every few minutes, her face tight with pain and fear. "Daniel, what if something's wrong?" she asked as I helped her into a wheelchair. "Nothing's wrong. Babies come when they're ready." "But Mark isn't here." "I'm here. It's not the same." "No, it's not the same. But it's what we have." The labor was long and difficult. 18 hours of walking the halls, breathing exercises, ice chips, and escalating pain. I stayed with her through all of it, holding her hand during contractions, advocating with the nurses, being the support system she needed. At 3:47 a.m. on Wednesday morning, James Alexander was born, 6 pounds, 2 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. "He's beautiful," Lena whispered, cradling him against her chest. He was beautiful. Despite everything, the betrayal, the lies, the destruction of our marriage, this innocent child was beautiful. "He looks like you," I said. "Do you think so?" "The eyes, definitely. And he has your nose." She smiled through her exhaustion. "Will you hold him?" I took the baby carefully, surprised by how light he felt, how perfectly he fit in my arms. He opened his eyes and looked at me with that unfocused newborn gaze, and I felt something shift in my chest. This child hadn't asked to be born into our complicated situation. He hadn't chosen to have Mark as a biological father, or me as a reluctant stepfather. He was just a baby who needed love and protection and guidance. "Hello, James," I whispered. "Welcome to the world." "James Daniel," Lena corrected. "I want his middle name to be Daniel." I looked at her sharply. "Lena, please, I want him to have your name. He's not my son." "Biologically, no. But you're going to be his father in every way that matters. Please, Daniel, let him carry part of your name." I looked down at the baby, at James Daniel, and made a decision that would change everything. "Okay. Really? Really. James Daniel Cross." She started crying again, but these were tears of relief and gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you for giving him a chance." "Every child deserves a chance, Lena, regardless of the circumstances of their birth. And thank you for giving me a chance." I didn't answer that. Some things were beyond forgiveness, beyond chances. But children, innocent children, deserved better than the sins of their parents. James fell asleep in my arms, his tiny fist curled around my finger, and I understood that whatever else happened, this child was now my responsibility. Not because I'd chosen him, but because he needed me. And sometimes, need is stronger than blood.